I'm fully convinced that monthly planning is the worst type of planning there is, mainly because it's the worst one for building routines. The months are different lengths, they all start on different days of the week, which means you get a different number of Mondays versus Thursdays versus Sundays from one month to another. If you're trying to build habits around things that you do at either the start, middle, or end of the month, then those days don't necessarily fall on the most convenient day of the week. That's why for the last 2 years, I've switched to cyclic planning, and I have pretty much no intentions of ever going back. Not only has this system made habit building way easier for me, but it's also greatly improved my time awareness, meaning I'm better able to set realistic expectations for myself of what I can get done in any period. I can stay more mindful about how time is passing, and build in natural reflection and reset points for myself. In this video, we're going to unpack cyclic planning, including what it is, why it's useful, and how you can use it. Starting with the what, rather than scheduling your tasks and routines on a typical monthly structure, we're going to take the year and cut it up a little bit differently. The key idea that started cyclic planning was wondering why we didn't just have 13 months in the year, where each month had 4 weeks each. 4 weeks times 13 cycles gives us 52 weeks, or 364 days, which is just shy of a typical year. Each of these cycles having the same amount of time just is a lot more user-friendly than months are. Rather than having a month with 31 days, and then another with 30, and then a random one with 29, but only every 4 years, we could just have 28-day blocks of time, which each had the same number of Mondays, same number of Thursdays, and same number of Sundays. While 13 cycles, each with 4 weeks, was the initial idea for cyclic planning, one of the issues came from the alignment of this with a typical monthly structure. If you go with 13 cycles across a year, that means that the ones in the middle of the year end up starting in the middle of a calendar month, which of its own right is not necessarily a problem, but there are other external things that I have in my life that kind of rely on a monthly structure. Just because I don't like monthly planning doesn't mean there aren't other things in my life that are still using it. And I wanted my cyclic planning system to align roughly to the calendar year. To combat this, we instead take the year and organize it into 4 quarters. Each of those quarters has 3 cycles within it, or 3 blocks of 4 weeks each, but each quarter also gets a bonus week that I like to call Reset Week. This week is a time to get cool, calm, and collected for the quarter ahead, and do the kind of tasks that help us get that fresh slate feeling. Things like refreshing our spaces, going over our goals and considering the progress we've made, and anything else that will give you that kind of clean slate for the new quarter. This means that the overall cyclic structure for the year sees us taking the year, separating it into 4 quarters, which each have 13 weeks, and then those 13 weeks are separated into 3 cycles, which each have 4 weeks, and that bonus or 13th week that we call Reset Week. So it's all good and well that through the power of autonomy, we can do this to the yearly structure, but why would you want to? Why not just use months and weeks and just go with the typical system? For me, one of the main reasons was just the appreciation of the passage of time. I was finding it that with a typical monthly structure, it was very hard to grasp the idea that when I get to the 10th, I'm a third of the way through the month, but then in just 5 days, I'm now halfway through the month, and now it feels like the month is practically over, and what have I even accomplished, and what do I have to show for it? And it would just kind of send me into a bit of a panic. Another thing I very much appreciate about having each cycle be 4 weeks is that each one of those weeks is 25% of the time I have that cycle. It made it much easier to plan out the goals and projects I was working on, considering, okay, if 1 week is 25% and I want to be to this point by the end of the cycle, what is 25% of that work? So what do I have to get done in each of those weeks? Also the fact that because we have that irregular number of days for each month, and they don't always start on the same day of the week, that means that things that I would want to do at the very start or the midpoint or the end of the month aren't always going to fall on days where it is feasible to do those. For instance, if I want to do a mid-month reflection to check in with my goals and consider the progress that I've made, ideally I'd like to be doing that on the weekend, maybe a Sunday, because I actually have available time to do it, not smack bang in the middle of the week on like a Thursday when my energy is typically at its lowest. By going from a system that can start on any day of the week to one that always starts on a Monday, at least for me, and one that has an irregular number of days with each new month, to one that has the same number of days for each cycle, It means that I can much more easily build routines in for myself around those reflection points, around things that I want to do at particular times of the month, and really just set up systems for myself that help support that routine building. Thinking more about those routines for me, given the fact that the structure of a cycle is going to be the same with every cycle, that means that the first day of my cycle is always going to be on a Monday, and that's a day that I already associate with a fresh start kind of feeling. The midpoint of each cycle, or the end of week 2, is always going to fall on a Sunday, a really good time for me to do an intentional check-in and consider the progress I'm making. Similarly, the end of a cycle will always fall on a weekend as well, so it gives me time to do the kind of tasks that would give me a fresh slate, a fresh start, for the next cycle. Stepping away from resetting and reflection though, and considering the actual action taking of my goals and projects, monthly planning didn't really support that either. With any given month, you don't necessarily have the same number of each day of the week. In one month, you might have 5 Sundays, which could primarily be your day to get stuff done, whereas the next month, you might only have 4. Do you then give yourself the same expectations in terms of output between those 2 months? That doesn't seem very fair. This essentially meant that any planning that I was doing for my goals and projects had to be done on a month-by-month basis, and had me very carefully considering how much available time I had just based on the number of days I had in that month. Even if it's not necessarily tied to the days of the week, if you have one month that has 28 days and another month that has 31, are you going to give yourself the same expectations for both of those months? It just doesn't seem fair. While there are certainly other factors that have to be considered when doing goal planning and project planning, this essentially just felt like playing on hard mode. Not only do I have to consider all the other external factors, but now I have to consider how many of each day type and how many days I have too. By being able to better organize and manage my time, being better able to plan my project work and such in a way that works with my brain, this is really why I've stuck with cyclic planning and haven't looked back. I have the same number of days for each cycle. I have the same number of each day type. It's easier to note the progression of time when each week represents 25%. And when I combine cyclic planning with quarterly planning, it helps me stay more cool, calm, and collected. If you're thinking that cyclic planning might be for you, then how does one even? How do we get started and organize a cyclic calendar? As said, we're going to take the year and cut it into 4 blocks that have 13 weeks each. These are the quarters. Each quarter will get divided into 3 cycles, with a cycle being 4 weeks long, and then we have an extra week or reset week. I like to organize it so that reset week is at the end of any quarter, as a time to reflect on the quarter that was and get prepared for the quarter ahead. Because this is your system, it means that whichever day you start on is completely up to you. This is not only in terms of the day of the week, but also which week you start on in general. I like to make it so that week 1 of cycle 1 in quarter 1 will be the first week of the new year that contains the majority of days for that year. In other words, it's the first week of the year that has at least 4 days from that year. So if we're thinking of a 7-day week, there has to be at least 4 days from that year for me to consider at week 1. I also like to start my cycles on a Monday, so that means that for 2026, my week 1 is going to be the 29th of December 2025 through to the 4th of January 2026. It essentially also means I get a head start on the year. If you want to start your cyclic calendar on a different date though, do not worry, I have a tool to help you out. We have a cyclic calendar calculator in our free resource library. All you have to do is put in the starting date for your new year, and it'll specify the date ranges for each cycle and reset week in the entire of the year. Along the bottom, we also have tabs with the date ranges that I'll be using for the next several years to help you out. That's not to say that you have to do it exactly the way I do. This is your cyclic calendar. But if you want to start your cycles on a Monday and have your calendar align the same way that mine is, then that'll be helpful for you. Now, as we mentioned before, 4 quarters with 13 weeks each, which each have 7 days, only actually gives us 364 days. So what happens to the extra day? This does not mean going from a beautiful cyclic calendar one year to the next year where you started on now a different day of the week. Unless you want to, this is your system, but no, that would give me the heebie-jeebies. Instead, similar to the regular calendar years, we also have leap years in a cyclic system. The difference is though, I'm not just gonna randomly tack an extra day onto one of the cycles and then just throw off our cyclic planning entirely. I like them all starting on the same day of the week. I like having the same number of each day of the week. And I don't want to get our lovely same day start system all misaligned. Instead, we're going to save up those extra days and use them for any year where, after planning out our 4 quarters, we still have 4 or more days left of the calendar year. Now, before you get worried that I'm going to make you do math, it's cool, I've got you covered. These cyclic leap years just give us a bonus week in 2026, 2032, and 2037 if you're going with Monday start calendars, or if you're going with Sunday start, that's going to be in 2025, 2031, and 2036. The way you use your bonus week is completely up to you, but I personally am going to be using it as essentially like a week 0 for the next year. So at the end of 2026, when we have our cyclic leap year for the Monday start calendars, I'm going to be using that as kind of like a double down on reset week, or essentially like a prep week or trial run before I get into cycle 1 of 2027. I'm going to be calling it week 0 for 2027, but that means that my cyclic calendar for 2026 looks like this, 2027 will look like this, 2028 will look like this, and 2029 will look like this. As said though, we do have that calculator to help you plan yours, but to get started with cyclic planning, all you need to do is firstly decide what day of the week you want to start on. For me, it's Monday, but plenty of people do Sunday as well. But this is your cyclic calendar, so if you want to start on a Thursday, that works too. Secondly, you just need to decide when your first cycle of the year will start, and then using our free calculator, you can calculate the date ranges for all of the cycles across the year and the reset weeks. As mentioned, that one's linked in the description box, or you can scan the QR code on screen to jump over to the resource library. Once you've got your calendar planned out though, then you just need to set up your planner according to the cycles. One of the key aspects from my planner setup when it comes to cyclic planning is having cyclic calendars rather than monthly ones, and we also have those available in the free resource library too. I put those into the front of my journal setup so that then they are very easy to reference as the year progresses. And if you wanted to see what a cyclic setup looks like in my journal, then this playlist is the next one to check out. That one has all of my cyclic planning setups, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.